And in Chile, there were a group of young men who were sons of aristocrats, and they were referred to as the Hwarang. So the Hwarang were flower boys. They were the metrosexuals, of early Korean history. They were the predecessors of the K-pop Kominam that you have in Korea today. So this is the Hwarang, and so the Hwarang practiced a way of life known as Punyu.
안녕하세요, 원다입니다. K-팝에서부터 K-드라마까지 한류는 세계인들의 큰 호응을 넘어 하나의 세계적인 현상이 되었습니다. 이와 더불어 유구한 역사를 가진 우리의 전통음악에 대한 세계인들의 관심 또한 높아지고 있습니다. 한국 전통음악에 대한 깊은 이해와 지식을 바탕으로 한국 전통음악을 널리 알리고 있는 외국인이 있는데요. 바로 힐러리 핀첨성 교수입니다. 그녀가 국악을 처음 접하게 된 건 대학원에서 인류음악학으로 석사과정을 밟을 때였다고 합니다. 세계 여러 나라의 음악을 들으며 공부하던 그녀는 우연히 한국 음악을 감상하게 되었고, 평소 동아시아의 음악은 시끄럽고 화려하기만 하다고 생각했었던 그녀였지만 국악을 듣자마자 상상해본 적도 없었던 아름다운 소리가 담겨있음을 알고 깜짝 놀랐다고 고백합니다. 특히 국악에는 다른 나라의 음악과는 달리 기분에 따라 즉흥적으로 변화하는 부분들이 있어 큰 매력으로 다가왔다고 말하는데요. 국악 음색의 신비에 매료되어 국악의 독창성을 연구하던 핀첨성 교수는 한국 사랑에 푹 빠지게 되었고, 결국 2008년 외국인 최초로 서울대 음악대학 국악과 교수로 임용돼 한국에 정착하게 되었습니다. 샌프란시스코 대학에서 한국음악 강의를 하던 그녀가 드디어 자신이 그토록 사랑하던 한국에서 강의를 시작하게 된 것이죠. 또한 힐러리 핀첨성 교수는 미국 하버드 대학에 초대되어 한국 전통음악에 대한 강의를 하기도 했었는데요. 한국 전통음악의 정신적 뿌리라는 타이틀로 진행된 그녀의 강의는 K-팝의 힘이 뿌리 깊은 한국 음악의 역사에서부터 비롯되었음을 시사하며 세계의 이목을 집중시켰습니다. 이 강의에서 힐러리 핀첨성 교수는 한국의 전통음악은 조선 왕조뿐만 아니라 그 이전의 고려 왕조, 그리고 그 이전의 삼국시대까지 아우르는 융합음악으로 오랜 세월을 거쳐 시대와 공간을 관통하여 발전해왔으며 지금의 음악에도 영향을 미치고 있다고 말합니다. 삼국시대 신라의 화랑이 지금 한국 사회에서 흔히 볼 수 있는 꽃미남의 전신이며 자연에 순응하기 위해 몸과 마음 그리고 정신을 함께 사용했던 화랑들의 풍류가 바로 K-팝의 뿌리였다는 것입니다. 미국 하버드 대학에서 이뤄진 힐러리 핀첨성 교수의 한국 전통음악에 대한 강의를 함께 들어보시죠.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Harvard Divinity School. It's our great pleasure to welcome you and to welcome these very fine musicians for a special evening, a lecture and performance, and we feel very honored to be hosting this event. We're fortunate enough to have this opportunity because of the remarkable work that Judy Eisenberg is doing as a professor. Judy is the founding director of a program there called Music Unites Us that twice a year brings world-renowned musicians where they speak at classes and do workshops and then have opportunities to do a concert. And this is our second opportunity to bring the musicians that are here in Boston, our community here at Harvard. So we have this wonderful opportunity and we're honored to have it. And I'm going to turn this over now to Judy, who will introduce Hillary, our musicologist and curator for the event last week and for this evening. So thank you.
So I'd like to introduce Dr. Hillary Fincham-Sung. I'll tell you a little bit about her. She's Associate Professor of Theory and Ethnomusicology in the Department of Korean Music at Seoul National University, where she teaches classes on ethnomusicology, world music, and Korean music. She served as the chair of the interdisciplinary major in music education at Seoul National University and formerly worked as a lecturer and researcher at the University of San Francisco and UC Berkeley. She's a haegum player. She has lived in Korea for the last 20 years and is really immersed in studying about and playing the music, so she really knows it from the inside. She's been our curator and speaker, guiding us through this incredibly beautiful, striking music all week. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Fincham-Sung.
I'm going to start with a brief introduction in Korean. 안녕하십니까? 짧게 제 소개해 드리겠습니다. 저는 서울대학교 국악과 교수이고요. 거기서 국악 이론 그리고 민족음악학 관련 수업하고 있습니다. 그래서 우리가 초대 특히 하버드 브랜다이스 대학교 이렇게 이번 주 레지던시 할 수 있어서 매우 영광합니다. 네, 지금까지 여기까지 한국말로만 얘기할 거고요. 언어 사회 그리고 코멘트 짧은 강의 다 영어로 할 겁니다. 일단 와주셔서 감사합니다. 오늘 즐겁게 보십시오. So my name is Hilary Fincham-Sung. Thank you very much for that introduction. We are really honored to be here. This has been a wonderful week as a part of the Music Unites Us residency. We've done a series of lectures in many different classes, so we've really stretched our boundaries, and I've stretched my academic limits. But it's been such a beautiful experience. We've jammed with musicians and students, so it's been a wonderful week. And as an ethnomusicologist, I study the relationship that people have with music. We often use music when we do our research as a way to understand better about culture and about people's lives. But we also study people's lives to better understand how they interpret musical sounds and how they think about music and hear music and perceive of it. So this is what I do. And one of the issues currently that we're very concerned with in ethnomusicology is soundscapes. How do we create music that reflects our environment and also helps project the identity that we wish to project to the world? It's interesting because when we got the question, so these musical instruments are related to Korean culture. So I thought, at first I was like, well, of course, and then I thought about it, and it was actually a very, very good question. We have to think about, why the instruments are constructed the way they are. Why does the voice project a sound that I would describe as very distinctly and uniquely Korean? And it's very much tied to ideas about aesthetics and beauty, but also the message that the music is meant to project, and also the story that the music is meant to tell. So it's been our job this week to tell a multi-layered story and to talk about the many different layers and the many different contexts in which Korean music has developed over time and through space, but also how it exists today in the world. Has anybody ever heard the Taepyeongso? Okay, well, right? Oh, and you're probably looking at the program going, ooh, this is going to be interesting in this space. Well, we had the same thought. The Taepyeongso is quite loud. It's typically designed for, but also used in outdoor performances, marching band music traditionally in Korea. It's a little bit loud for this space. We're going to be telling a story of musical syncretism, and many different theologies and ideologies that have crisscrossed and developed over time in Korea. Oftentimes, sometimes people talk about Korea, particularly the Chosun era, people often emphasize the Neo-Confucian or the very strict Confucian approach to society and life that was projected during that particular period of time. But it was still very much a syncretic period of time, and the dominance of Neo-Confucianism at that time influenced music development, but also heavily influenced development in other areas like Buddhism and also shamanism, and that is strongly influenced. And there was ritual music at court called aak, and so the ritual music was very slow, very stately, very impressive, very majestic. Another type of music that was very much tied to Confucian ideals was called Punyu. Now this is where I get to syncretism, because Punyu didn't start in the Chosun era. It actually started way before that particular time. Way before the Koryo dynasty, there was a period of time called the Three Kingdoms period, and there were three kingdoms. Among them, one of the dominant kingdoms was Shilla. And in Shilla, there were a group of young men who were sons of aristocrats, and they were referred to as the Hwarang. So the Hwarang were flower boys, and they were given this name because they wore these flowers in their hair. But they were also pretty boys of the time. They were the metrosexuals, of early Korean history. They were the predecessors of the K-pop Kominam that you have in Korea today. So this is the Hwarang, and so the Hwarang practiced a way of life known as Punyu, and Punyu means wind and stream. And it really draws heavily on this idea that we must use our bodies, our minds, our spirits to connect to nature. So the Hwarang engaged in a variety of activities, from sports, horseback riding, archery, to poetry, calligraphy, and music making. And this was a part of life. This was a way of life. life known as Punyu, and music was just a part of this. And so there's an aesthetic that emerged at that time, and that aesthetic was naki pulyu e pulbi, this idea. It's not Confucian, it's not Buddhist necessarily, it's really Taoist in nature. But this Taoist idea was very appealing. So the Hwarang existed and they flourished during the Shilla, and then time went on, and some people believe the Hwarang kind of died out in popularity. And then you had the opening of the Chosun dynasty in 1392. And there were still the landed aristocrats at that time, and they were very interested in following the Confucian example. But they found Punyu very appealing, because the Punyu ideals also espoused things like respecting the king, even ideas about revenge. There was a whole Hwarang aesthetic and moral code and commandments that this group of young men went by. And these ideals were very appealing to the literati, the Sonbi, who were, pretty much in control of society. These were the people that were born into a status. They were the landed aristocrats, and they were the ones who were able to take the civil service exam so that they could then hold state positions or government positions. But in their spare time, they engaged in music making and poetry writing and calligraphy, and they practiced a lifestyle that they were calling Punyu. So this Punyu aesthetic thrived and developed very strongly still during the Chosun era. And so music was a very strong part of this. And so this is where we have this genre of music that I'm about to introduce, which is known as Punyu. So this is a secular music associated with court life at that particular time.
뿌리 깊은 한국 음악의 힘과 한국 음악이 가진 고유의 정체성과 아름다움을 전 세계에 알리고 있는 힐러리 핀첨성과 같은 진정한 학자들 덕분에 우리가 가진 소중한 것을 제대로 알리는 것이 얼마나 중요한지를 다시 한 번 더 돌아보게 됩니다. 시청해주셔서 감사합니다. 원다였습니다.